Support for Digging Deeper comes from the Penn State Alumni Association, connecting alumni to the university and to each other. The Alumni Association is powered by pride. Learn more at alumni.psu.edu. And from viewers like you, thank you.
Hi, I'm Robert Johnson. Important scientific breakthroughs take hard work, long hours, and sometimes luck. Traditional discoveries typically happen in a single field like biology, engineering, or chemistry, but something called convergence research is opening new doors of discovery. It calls for close collaboration across areas of expertise. The most famous example, DNA. Chemists, computer scientists, and biologists work together to sequence the human genome. Today, similar work is happening in fields like healthcare and energy. And this episode of Digging Deeper, Penn State President Eric Barron discusses convergence research with Clive Randall, a professor of materials science and engineering, and Daniel Hayes, an associate professor of biomedical engineering.
Thank you both for joining me. I'm really excited about this topic because I go around the world after visiting lots of universities and saying there's nothing like the degree of collaboration at Penn State between disciplines. It just is part of the uniqueness of the fabric of Penn State. So we have this example here that is so rather remarkable called the Millennium Science Complex. Clive, what's going on in that building? What makes it so unique?
Well, I think it's a long evolution that's been going on at Penn State. Interdisciplinarity was here in the materials space with the Materials Research Lab in the 1960s. But time has moved on, and we now have to deal with multiple discipline ways of solving big problems. And so this means that you have to be talking to many different disciplines, from the social science, computational science, chemists, mathematicians, everybody. And all of us then have to work together in terms of really facing these very difficult problems, such as feeding the planet, making the planet healthy, and so forth. So a lot of our efforts are designed around those types of problems, the big problems, things like the National Academy calls the grand challenges.
Mm-hmm. So Millennium Science is kind of a building for the grand challenges.
In part.
In part. No, now, some people are calling this convergent research, this notion that here's a discipline and here's a discipline, and really the problems are driving you to partner. Is this a good description of the way science is emerging and engineering is emerging?
Absolutely, and it's taken a while to get there because the agencies in Washington and other places have to fund these types of efforts, and people have to get out of their comfort zones to have a biologist talk to a material scientist or a mathematician or a physicist.
The entire funding cycle is really not adapted for people that are partnering across disciplines. It sort of tends to keep you in your silos. What are some good examples, Dan, of things going on inside the Millennium Science Complex that you're involved in?
Sure. So working with Ibrahim Osbalat, who's an additive manufacturing 3D printing person. So he actually prints tissue.
And he prints human tissue.
Yes. Yeah. And this is for regenerative medicine. And he tackles a number of different problems. But the one that we're working on, which I think resonates with a lot of people, is the osteochondral interface. So the interface at the end of your bone. And so when people talk about osteoporosis and bone loss and damage to the bone, we're actually trying to print new interfaces that would replace those. Because right now there's not an effective therapy for it. But everyone knows as they age, their knees get bad, their elbows get bad. And we don't have very good treatments for that right now. And so we're using this kind of both combination of basic stem cell biology, 3D printing, engineering, nanoparticle-based drug delivery, and this all converges in a specific therapy.
So you actually printing something that is the composition of tissue?
Absolutely.
That's what it is, as opposed to actually replicating a piece of a human.
Well, you're trying to make it as close to the native tissue biomimetic, as we would say, as possible. So we want this to be a drop-in solution for a clinician. And so it's not just a science experiment. We're actually doing this in animals at this point, and then we're going to hopefully move it forward to human beings if the results are successful.
It's amazing. So, of course, one of the questions that just about anybody asks is, why should the regular person, non-scientist person, think this is all a good idea? But so you could profoundly change someone's knee surgery, replacement surgery.
Oh, absolutely. We'd hope to avoid replacement surgery, that they could instead just get a piece of their own tissue that's been regrown and regenerated instead of having an artificial knee. And I mean, obviously with an aging population and an overweight population that we have in North America, it's an important issue.
So is this seem like a natural problem to associate with a Millennium Science Complex? Because one wing you have the life sciences and the other side of it you have the material sciences, two exceptional programs, and you meet in the middle of life sciences and material sciences.
I think it is, and there's so many ways that we can interact with each other. I mean, here we're taking additive manufacturing, connecting it to stem cells, and then triggering those stem cells with nanoparticles to then create a certain type of histology that then gives you the functions that you need for certain things. The progress of that will be to eventually create your new pancreases and livers and lungs and so forth. So this whole regenerative medicine side of it is rather fascinating.
I hope you hurry, because I'm aging fast here. Who knows what might need to be replaced here?
Us too.
And then there's the flip side of what you can learn from bio-inspired concepts to then. We've got, for example, scientists that are working on lessons learned from, say, a pitcher coniferous plant, of where you've got where ants will climb up the outside and then drop into the inside, and never escape and be digested by this coniferous plant. And so we've got scientists then learning about what that structure is of those plant cells, and then mimicking them with various lithographic and chemical processes to then make slippery surfaces. So that then becomes important for how oil will go down the inside of a tube to then be more easily transported without friction. For basically defogging optics and so forth in various different types of environments. How you can maximize the energy efficiency of water harvesting. So there are so many different things, and then there is also the electronics component of it.
Absolutely.
So how do you pick? How do these two big engines side by side? What's driving the innovations and the directions that people are choosing?
Faculty, the skills. I mean, the structure of that we have as a university with the institutes and so forth creates a certain level of dialogue across the disciplines. This is an important mixture, as well as the physical building. But basically bringing the right people together to solve the problem and be passionate about that problem is where it comes from.
But it doesn't strike me that it's all that natural to sit there and say, let's look at a ant-eating plant and see how the slipperiness of it can be applied to other. There has to be some level of energy that there's. Is there just really different faculty rubbing elbows?
I definitely think that's part of it. And then you have the Millennium Science Cafe, which brings together these diverse faculty, and you see people presenting problems and their solutions. And it does. It inspires interaction. You think that you may have a tool or technique or an innovation that will help them solve their problem. And it really is that mixing, that ecosystem.
Describe the Millennium Cafe.
So every Tuesday morning we have coffee, and the idea of that is really to have an intellectual exchange between the people from the life science side and from the physical science side. So there's two presentations. We encourage students and faculty alike to present, and they talk a little bit about their lives, and then they transition that into what their passion and their problem is, and where they see a future opportunity with that problem, but where they need help. And this has led to a number of different collaborations, which then led to grants and papers and so forth, and in some cases even patents. I think previously on Digging Deeper, you had David Hughes and Siwon Liu sit here.
Right.
And that was a good example where David Hughes saw Siwon's presentation on essentially a spectroscopy device that could be inserted into a phone to then do certain types of molecular spectroscopy. And although at the time it was really designed for a biological healthcare diagnostic, it then turned into a method of actually getting early data on contaminated plants.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Absolutely amazing.
And I love bragging about the one where the arts and architecture professor is trying to save energy loss between a window and a wall, ends up talking about glass, ends up looking at 3D printers, prints a seamless wall, and then wins a competition with NASA to use a 3D printer to build a building on Mars. To me, I look at this and I go, that's just a perfect example of what it means to be at Penn State.
Absolutely.
And when anybody says interdisciplinary research, you sort of go, oh, okay, interdisciplinary research, but this has some profound impact.
And of course, people might react, say, well, when are we going to go to Mars? I mean, the important point is that this gives us a building structure of where we can deal with this expanding population that we have on the planet. We have an enormous amount of houses to be built because of the 9 billion people that will be occupying the next 50 years.
And maybe you don't want to cart that material all over the place.
Exactly.
Instead, you're going to be, so it may look like this is NASA thinking about Mars, but the applications here are profound.
The applications are very much terrestrial.
So what are some of the things that you're most proud of that have come out of this collaboration?
So I think the nanoparticle work has really been, and not just at Penn State, I would say one could argue that nanoparticle and biology is one of the first revolutions that we're experiencing in the 21st century, where people started just developing nanomaterials and then saw their application for then having a payload for then knocking out a cancer.
Absolutely. If you look at Jim Adair's work in material science, he's been making calcium-based nanoparticles as both diagnostics and drug delivery vehicles, and those are actually going to clinical trials now. And I mean, that's clearly an intersectional undertaking. It's a classic materials problem, but also a biological and clinical problem.
So here's this extremely small particle. You're going to inject it in the bloodstream, and because of material science, it'll attach to a tumor.
Absolutely.
And attaching to the tumor means that I don't dose my entire body with the chemotherapy. Instead, I target it to the tumor. I mean, this does seem to me, I mean, my memory is the second fastest set of cells growing are your heart. And so chemotherapy can have a profoundly negative impact on your heart.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
So here's an opportunity, instead of affecting your heart, go straight at the tumor.
Yes.
That's right. And some of these antibiotics and so forth not only just attacks different parts of the body, sometimes they overdose and cause the body to collapse in many, many ways, including the heart, as you said. But putting them into a little capsule, which then has the ability to then go to right where it needs to go, and then to release itself right on demand, is a very intelligent way of dealing with a very, very powerful enemy.
Yeah, incredible. Other examples you like sharing? I love hearing these things. It's just like, it suggests an amazing future out there.
So I mean, I think one of the other things that Penn State has done very nicely in bringing people together is around instrumentation. And so in the basement of the Millennium Science Complex, we have a number of core facilities of which all our faculty and companies can use alike. And one of the areas that we've had a continuous dialogue with the people in the life science side, as well as the energy environment, is where we can cross and develop techniques that will be of benefit to many types of researchers. And that means that we're building instruments that will help a biologist, but will also help maybe the design of a new battery.
Now, one of the instruments is, if I remember this, a cryo...
The Cryo Microscope, yes.
Microscope. Now, the reason why many people might have heard it is because it's so expensive, we had to receive approval from our Board of Trustees.
Yes.
Now, normally they're doing buildings, and so this is a rather unique thing for them as well to approve a microscope. And of course, they're trusting us that this microscope can have a profound impact. What's the impact of spending many millions of dollars on a microscope like that?
Well, I guess the first revolution in biology, where biology and physics met, was Crick and Watson's discovery of the structure of DNA.
Yeah.
Right. And a number of laboratories then embraced really understanding structure and then linking it to its functionality in terms of how these molecules are interacting with human tissue, cells, and so forth. It becomes a very difficult problem to then concentrate enough material to be able to do this. You need, previously you needed milligrams of a particular biological substance to then be able to probe this. With the cryo microscope, you can work with micrograms of material. So you can get to the answers so much faster. The Zika virus, for example, was discovered and characterized almost within days. It would have taken months and years to get to that point without this technique.
Wow. Fantastic.
So the acceleration of learning, and for us to be, for our structural biology folks to be able to make this jump, they have to be competitive.
So this is another benefit. By everybody working together, you can have equipment that otherwise you could not get if you were in your individual silos.
And it also helps the polymer science people, the other people that are interested in carrying, say, a piece of DNA or a small molecule in a hydrogel, freezing that in, and then seeing how that release of some of these important agents come off Dan's particles, for example.
So Dan, this is, suppose we didn't have a Millennium Cafe and we didn't have a Millennium Science Building, and you were looking at the research that you're working on, would it have still happened?
It would have been tremendously more difficult. The resources that are made available by Huck in MRI, and particularly in the MSC complex, have really enabled the research. We're taking a polymer, a new synthetic biopolymer that we're commercializing right now as a bone additive, and that was made possible by both the staff, the equipment, and the finances that are available through the Millennium Science Complex, MRI, and Huck.
So it's without incentivizing it, without enabling it, coming out of your silos, not an easy thing to do. It's part of the reason why so many institutions out there that are very distributed and less collaborative, they're not doing things like this.
And I wish we could duplicate it across campus, because
in many more categories.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. How many would you do? I can't afford very much.
Just two.
No, I mean there's many crossovers that are required, and certainly a building where people can come together. I mean, our building already is brimming in terms of the intellectual exchanges, the number of people inside it, and we could do with another floor on it. So we're already at capacity after 4 years.
Oh, well, that's a good problem to have, though, isn't it?
It's an excellent problem to have.
Industry must be keenly interested in what's going on between these two buildings. Do you have a lot of industry interest?
Absolutely. On an annual basis, we deal with 140 companies coming in, and then, as Dan has referred to, there's a number of startups that are coming out. I mean, the whole Penn State activity, I think, is
matches up.
the very first I was amazed when I went up to the Penn State and saw the event, Penn State event. The number of material-based companies that came out of patents that was there, and from different departments as well. For example, I'm thinking of Jeff Ketchmark, right? Jeff Ketchmark works on cellulose, biologically derived material. Has been testing that into wounds. And then, and you find an accelerated healing process going on with agricultural matter that is treated in certain ways.
Yeah. It's amazing. That's amazing. Well, I really appreciate the two of you joining me here today. Fascinating topic, and to think that here you take really bright people and you put them together and you do really exciting things and outcomes that have huge amount of impact. And then here it is, even Penn State pushing this out into the marketplace to serve society even better. It's very exciting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Great discussion, Dr. Barron. Thank you so much for joining me.
Happy to be here.
Yes, definitely. So we all understand that convergence research now is so important. And as students, as we learn and grow and then become those scientists and those innovators and those leaders, how can we take time now to prepare to become convergence researchers in the future?
You know, I think in some ways Penn State is offering the perfect opportunity, right? Because it's you could hear how naturally this is occurring with the faculty members, combined with a building, combined with an attitude. And if you go to the Millennium Cafe to listen to these ideas, it's full of students. The room is full of students. So they're all seeing firsthand, and they get to work in these faculty members' labs. So in many ways, they can take a very strong foundation in a science that they're interested in, and then really be enabled to broaden their minds and ideas of how to solve a problem with a group of people that very eagerly do so.
And in the conversation, you said taking really bright people and putting them together. What an amazing way to do it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Beautiful building on top of that.
That's very true. Yeah. I love it all the time. So what's the next step in research? How can we go even further and improve research capabilities?
Well, you know, so there's lots of directions you could take. And one direction, which we were sort of hinting at, is more areas to make these combinations. And you're watching the university as a whole in its strategic planning and in philanthropy define energy security, food security, water security, human health as these major topics that only a Penn State, a comprehensive university with attitude, can solve in the same ways. Because if you look at what goes into energy, everything from communications to regulation to technology to discovering the resource, these are big, complicated problems. So one avenue here is to apply this type of approach to more areas with I think, profound significance.
And you mentioned philanthropy in that discussion.
Yeah.
And of course, we have to talk about the largest student-run philanthropy in the world, Thon, recently raising more than $10 million in the fight against childhood cancer. And of course, other schools, even high schools, have adopted a lot of what we do here. What do you think makes Thon so special, specifically here at Penn State University?
Yeah, of course, it's the beginning. And that's one big part of it. And it's grown from $1972 and $2,000 to over $10 million. The level of participation with 16,000, 17,000 student volunteers, all of these things, people coming together, the direct contact with the patients is something that is really unique. And I must admit, every time I go stand on that floor and I look up in the room and I look at the dancers and even 40 hours in, and they're smiling and they know what they're doing, they know why they're there. It's incredibly exciting.
And for people out there who are watching this who haven't been on the Thon floor, and I know you have, when the first time you stepped on that Thon floor, what did it feel like for you?
Well, so I have to tell you that when it was in Rec Hall, my wife and I went to see, and I was the Dean of the College of Earth and Mineral Sciences, we went on the floor to be with our couple of dancers. And we were just thinking, this is a big deal. So to be gone a decade and come back, and very few people are watching, and to come back and see 16,000 people in that building, it's mind-boggling. Mind-boggling with a wonderful purpose.
And for students who are coming in who are like, I don't really know if I should get involved, I'm not too sure.
Doesn't take long. Once they hear it, once they talk about it, to be a dancer is something people really take a lot of pride in. But then you look at the people that do operations and the fundraising, and really this is also an incredibly practical learning experience. I'd hire someone who ran a thon in an instant because I know they can manage and do well. So lots of value in friendship, doing something good for society, and learning how to function and operate in a large effort, saving lives. It's hard to think of a negative there.
That's definitely true. You have the experience of it, you've lived it,
Yep.
and you're encouraging other people to be a part of it.
And they want to be back.
That's
They
right.
want to come back and do it again.
That's exactly right. Thank you so much for chatting with me.
My pleasure.
Support for Digging Deeper comes from the Penn State Alumni Association, connecting alumni to the university and to each other. The Alumni Association is powered by pride. Learn more at alumni.psu.edu. And from viewers like you, thank you.